Hey guys, welcome back to Steel City Sports. I hope you all had a great weekend because we had an incredible week too. Obviously, it's not over yet. We still have Monday Night Football between the Eagles and Falcons, but that Sunday slate of games was insane. I mean, we had some of the craziest performances of the year thus far. I mean, that Chiefs-Bengals game, everyone's talking about how that ended. We had the Saints just slaughtering the Cowboys in Jerry World. I mean, what an insane week of football. We're going to talk about all that tomorrow. I'll be reviewing every game. But today, I decided I wanted to do kind of a fun video, and that is let's just overreact. Let's take a look at three teams that I overrated going into the year and three teams that I underrated going into the year just based off of the first 2 weeks of the season. Now, you guys will have to let me know in the comments. Do you think that these concerns I'm going to list or positives are fair for these teams? And are they going to hold up throughout the majority of the season? Or is this really an overreaction? So let's get into the teams now that I either over or underrated. So the first team we're going to overreact to is the 0-2 Indianapolis Colts because I picked this team to be a playoff team. I thought they'd be like a 10 or 11 win team. And just how it looks right now, that's not the case. This defense is flat out awful. I thought they were going to have an elite pass rush. It's kind of been non-existent. And the most glaring problem with the Colts is by far and away Anthony Richardson. I think a lot of people, myself included, saw what he did in that limited sample size last year and really just overrated him because he's clearly in need of a lot of development. His accuracy is just way off. And that's just something, I don't know if you can fix that. You know, that might just be a flaw of his play style. I don't know. And if you listen to me, if you're one of like the 3 people subscribed to me before last season started, I said, you know, when I ranked all the quarterbacks going into last season, I had Anthony Richardson at dead last because I was like, yeah, he has really high upside, but I feel like it's going to take him a long time to really develop. He's really a project-type quarterback. I don't see him as a guy just walking into the NFL and being a day one starter. Now, it looked like I was wrong initially on that last year because that sample size, he looked really good. It was like 3.5 games before he got hurt. So going into this year, I was like, well, just based on that sample size, he had the poise of a vet. He looked pretty good. He's a really good athlete. I think he's going to work out well. I may have jumped the shark on Anthony Richardson because it's absolutely inexcusable to lose to Malik Willis in any NFL game. I mean, he got outplayed by Malik Willis through 3 interceptions. I just don't know how accurate Anthony Richardson is. And to pair that with the defense is not good. The defense can't stop anyone. The skilled position people on this team has always been a problem for me. But even now, like Michael Pittman Jr. hasn't done a thing in these first 2 games. Jonathan Taylor's been all right. But overall, this team is very concerning for me because, like I said, I did have pretty high expectations for them, and they start off 0-2 with a brutal loss to the Packers, which is absolutely unacceptable. And Anthony Richardson maybe was a little, or maybe more than a little, overrated going into this year. And another team it looks like I overrated, staying in the same division, is the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, I didn't pick them to be a playoff team. I thought they'd be like a 9-win team, stay in the thick of it, compete for a wild card spot. But they look more like a 6-win team than they do a 9-win team right now. And I think the big thing is Trevor Lawrence. I'm willing to admit when I get stuff wrong. I've been a big defender of T-Law on this channel, but he's not talented enough to elevate his team. And I think right now the Jags have a pretty mediocre roster. They paid Trevor Lawrence to be a guy who could carry his team into the playoffs, and he's just not good enough to do that. He's a good quarterback. He's not great. He's not elite. He's just a good starting quarterback. I think he's a lot closer to the 16th best quarterback than he is number 1, which can be hard, you know, especially when a guy like Trevor Lawrence had so much hype. Maybe that's why Jacksonville gave him that contract. I don't know. I just, for me, he seems kind of limited. The offensive line's really bad. The skills position people. I mean, I like the rookie Brian Thomas Jr. a lot. I wanted him to be a Pittsburgh Steeler, but outside of him, like the receiving core is very thin. Like I never liked Gabe Davis, Christian Kirk. I never saw him as a number 1. ETN, I think, is kind of a disappointment, and the defense can't really do a whole lot either. So this team was kind of constructed for Trevor Lawrence to be able to kind of carry them. At least that's when I look at this roster. There's not really a whole lot that pops out to me. So when you look at how much money T-Law was given, it's kind of like they thought he'd be the savior of this team, and he's just not good enough to elevate his team whenever they play more talented teams. That loss against Miami complete embarrassment. I mean, Doug Peterson got completely embarrassed with how he called that game, and I think he is really on a hot seat. Doug Peterson could be fired before this season is over. And, another guy I have defend on this channel is Doug Peterson, but, someone said something the other day. I had to look into it. Doug Peterson only has one season where he's won more than 10 games. That was the year they won the Super Bowl. Every other year, he's either went like 500 or worse than that. It's kind of crazy because when you think of Doug Peterson, he has that Super Bowl, you think he's been this dominant guy. No, he's a very 500 level coach, and it's kind of showing this year through the first two games. I could see him getting fired, and I could see Jacksonville kind of imploding pretty quickly. Now, this is called an overreaction video for a reason. I'm not saying things are going to play out and hold still like they have through the first 2 weeks, but the Baltimore Ravens are 0-2 and last in their division right now. And I said in my picks, when I picked all the week 2 games, it's time to hit the panic button if you lost to the Raiders. Well, guess what? They lost to the Raiders at home. Legitimately one of the most embarrassing losses of the season thus far. I mean, it is absolutely unexcusable to lose to the Las Vegas Raiders. I think have a bottom 5 roster in the NFL right now. Literally have a backup playing quarterback right now. And you have the reigning MVP, all these playmakers all over the team, and you lose at home is disgraceful. It really is. And I think it really highlights some of the big flaws of this Ravens team. Most notably, their offensive line is just bad. It's flat out bad. And I feel like the O-line has been a big rock of this team for, ever since Lamar's come into the league, he's had a pretty good to elite level offensive line. Their O-line sucks this year. It's just flat out bad. I don't know if Todd Monken, the offensive coordinator, knows what he's doing because his game plans against the Chiefs, against the Raiders, even going back to the AFC title game against the Chiefs, it seems like he's kind of in over his head. He doesn't really know what he's doing. The way they've used Derrick Henry, I mean, it was better against the Raiders, but giving him 13 carries against the Chiefs is kind of a head-scratcher there. Kind of feels like they don't know what they're doing on offense, and they're just like, hey, Lamar, go out there and make some plays. Now, again, not trying to react too much, but they're on this list for a reason. They're 0-2. They're last place in their division. I picked them to be the number 1 seed again in the AFC. And right now, they kind of look like a mess. Yeah, it's absolutely unacceptable to lose to the Raiders. So now let's get a little more optimistic and look at 3 teams that I underrated, starting off with the Buffalo Bills. Now, it's kind of crazy to say that I underrated them because if you go back and listen to my video where I picked the AFC playoff teams, I still picked the Bills to win their division, yet somehow I feel like I underrated them because I said their Super Bowl window was closed. I thought they were going to get off to a slow start because they lost like all their key guys in their secondary. They lost Stephon Diggs. I thought they were going to kind of take a step back and get off to a slow start. I was completely wrong about that. They got a good win over the Cardinals, and I think the Cardinals are a lot better than what people think, and I think that was on full display against that game with the Rams. I know the Rams have their injuries, but the Cardinals, they looked incredible in that game, and the Bills beat them week 1. And then week 2, Thursday Night Football, they absolutely bludgeoned the Miami Dolphins, like pulverized. They punched them in the fucking throat. It was honestly kind of hard to watch and pretty embarrassing for me because I picked the Miami Dolphins in that one, but whatever. The Bills, I think the biggest key to, obviously, Josh Allen. I mean, he is one of the best players on the planet right now. I think only second to Mahomes right now. But I think the thing that has really changed this Bills team, you look at the second half of last year and the start of this year, it's the emergence of James Cook. This guy's a stud. James Cook has completely changed this offense because in years prior, Allen had to literally be Superman. He still does that from time to time. But I think he only threw for I want to say 16, 17 times in that Dolphins game. And it was still a blowout win. And that's because James Cook has arrived as a legit guy, a real focal point of this team. And I was going to review that Dolphins-Bills game, but I felt like it would be kind of mean-spirited to just shit on Tua after what happened, so I didn't put out a review. But yeah, I was basically just going to talk about this, like how they were so dominant. It's not like Josh Allen did a whole lot. It's because it's a very well-rounded team. This looks like the best the O-line has been in the Josh Allen era. You got a stud at running back. The receivers are a little better than I thought they'd be, especially Shakir is a very reliable weapon for Josh Allen. You got Kincaid, of course. And the defense, even though they lost some high-end guys, some guys we thought were really important to their defense, looks like their defense hasn't missed a beat. So, yeah, even though I picked the Bills to be their division winner, I feel like I still kind of underrated them because I said they'd be like a 10-11 win team. They look more like a 13-win team. So like I said, this is an overreaction video, so let's just overreact with the Minnesota Vikings. I mean, just based off the first 2 weeks, why can't they win this division? The Bears look supremely overrated. They could have just as easily been in this video. Caleb is really struggling. The Packers, I get it, they got that win over the Colts, but Jordan Love's going to be out for at least the next 4 or 5 weeks. I see them losing a bunch of games there. And the Lions, they don't look anywhere near as unbeatable as they were last year. They almost blew it to a depleted Rams roster in week 1, and then they just lost to Tampa at home. So Minnesota, if their offense keeps up like this, they could honestly threaten to win this division with how good that offense looks, with Sam Darnold actually playing like a pretty good quarterback. And that was the reason why I didn't think Minnesota would be any good, is Sam Darnold. I was like, everywhere this guy has gone in his NFL career, he's been an abject failure. But it looks like maybe he's matured. Maybe he's finally figured it out. You know, we've seen this happen with other guys like Baker Mayfield. It took him jumping around a couple teams to really figure it out, to get the right setup in Tampa. Maybe that's the case with Sam Darnold. He's got a lot to work with there. He's got Jefferson. He's got good running back, good line, good coach. The Vikings are on fire right now, and it was one thing to beat up on the Giants. I was like, okay, well, I kind of expected you to beat the Giants. I see the Giants as a team competing for the number 1 overall pick. You go back to when I ranked all the teams. I ranked the Giants at 31. I knew they were going to suck this year. But to beat the Niners is like unthinkable. You know, the 49ers, I had them as the number 1 team from week 1 because of how they just bludgeoned the New York Jets. But the Vikings came out and beat the Niners. I would have thought that was like unthinkable going into this year. So you got to give the Vikings credit. If they keep this up, they're going to be a playoff team. I think one of the biggest stories coming out of week 2 is the New Orleans Saints just curb stomping the Dallas Cowboys. And I think the Saints were in a very similar spot with the Vikings in that they beat up on a really bad team week 1. And then week 2, they come out and destroy a playoff team from last year. Like, this game wasn't even competitive. Like, this game was done by half. That's how good the Saints looked. They're running Shanahan's offense here. Their defense was really good last year. And you go back to last year, they were still a 9-win team with their offense being god-awful. So this year, they still have that great defense. But now on offense, you're running Shanahan-style offense with their new coordinator, Clint Kubiak. So I talked about this in the offseason, is that their offense is probably going to look better, but ultimately I didn't believe in the Saints because I said I don't trust Derek Carr and I don't trust Dennis Allen. But just based off the first 2 weeks, Dennis Allen's going to get an extension and Derek Carr's the front runner for MVP just based off the first 2 weeks right now. So the Saints offense is insane. They got a good line. Derek Carr is playing some of the best football of his career right now. Alvin Kamara, one of the most underrated players of this era. I mean, that guy is a freak, and he really showed that with 4 touchdowns against Dallas. The 1-2 punch at receiver with Shaheed and Olave. I mean, this team is just loaded with talent, and it looks like they're going to easily cruise to win the NFC South. And I think they're one of the most exciting teams right now. Will this keep up? Maybe they'll fizzle out, and we'll all be like, hey, remember when the Saints had that cool little run to start off the year? Or are they going to keep it up and actually be a playoff team? So there we go. That's my overreactions based off week 2. Let me know what you thought about this. Are these fair overreactions? Let me know some of yours down in the comments. And if you made it this far, really appreciate you listening. Please like and subscribe.